You are listening to Aftersight. This recording is intended solely for individuals who are blind or have low vision.
Thank you for joining us for the Thursday, September 12th reading of the Colorado Sun. My name is Jeannie DeMarinis. Today we will be reading the following main articles. Water. Is climate change making the Colorado Trail a thirst trap? It's Complicated by Shannon Mullane. Then Crime in Courts. Broomfield police are responding to active shooting at apartment complex by Jesse Paul. Followed by Housing. Does Denver have too many gas stations? City Council pushes new limits to save space for affordable housing by Michael Booth. Then Wildfire. Loveland man poses as firefighter after sparking Alexander Mountain fire, officials say, by Olivia Prensel. Then Crime in Courts. Teen boy shot by Colorado Town Council member after looking for a homecoming photo spot on private property, sheriff says, by Jennifer Brown. We will be following up with other miscellaneous articles. News. Water. Is climate change making the Colorado Trail a thirst trap? It's Complicated. Southwest Colorado, where the trail ends, is heating and drying faster than the rest of the state, experts say. 2 hikers found out that the hard way, by Shannon Mullane. It's uncomfortable to spend a night without water. It's even more uncomfortable if you're miles from civilization on the Colorado Trail with no certainty about where to find the next drop. That's the situation hikers Heidi Stetzler and Karen Ahern found themselves in after several hoped-for water sources turned up dry in late July. They're not alone. Water supplies along stretches of Colorado's namesake trail are under more stress as the state faces rising temperatures and prolonged drought. This means that even guidebook-toting experienced hikers can find their well-laid plans derailed by the unexpected. That's the lesson Ahern and Stetzler learned well. There was a creek in the guidebook, and I was like, let's get there, Ahern said, referring to the official Colorado Trail Pocket Guidebook. It was completely dry. My heart sank. The Colorado Trail is one of the nation's premier long-distance trails. It heads southwest from Denver, passing through 5 river systems, spanning nearly 90,000 vertical feet, and running over 500 miles before ending in Durango. Ambitious long-distance hikers have to carefully time their journey on the trail, which typically takes 4 to 6 weeks to complete. The start time varies depending on when the snow melts in June. Some water sources dry up by July and August, and early season snowstorms can start in September. Since 1988, at least 5,500 people have completed the entire trail, including 499 in 2023, according to the Colorado Trail Foundation. But water isn't always where it used to be, when it used to be there. Climate scientists are tracking long-term changes like temperature increases, precipitation declines, and even a snowpack that seems to be shrinking and melting earlier in the summer. These changes impact more than the state's namesake trail. The snowpack is Colorado's primary water source, and snow on the western slope feeds the 7-state Colorado River Basin. Less snow and earlier melt can strain water resources for farmers, fishing guides, rafting companies, and communities, especially in the late summer. For trail users, it means that long-standing norms outlined in blogs and books don't always apply, or instead of leaving technology behind, they're relying on phone apps for real-time updates about trail conditions. It means planning for more uncertainty. Running out of water. When Stelzer, a spiritually minded environmental scientist based in Durango, ran out of water on the Colorado Trail, her first thought was to pray. Her second was that it probably had something to do with climate change. We were above 12,000 feet. That's high. If the snow is going to stick around anywhere, it's going to be two places. One, the subalpine forest, and it's going to be at higher elevations, said Stelzer, who specializes in alpine environments. Stelzer and her hiking buddy Ahern set out from the San Luis trailhead north of Creede in late July. Ahern, a Denver Public Schools speech pathologist, had been tracking sections of the trail for 3 years. This summer, her fourth, she aimed to hike her last stretch from Creede to Durango, and she was excited to have Stelzer join her for a few days. On the first day, the pair didn't make it as far as planned and had to use their packed water to, quote, dry camp instead of camping near a lake. The next day they refilled at Spring Creek Pass. Then the next potential water source, marked with a half cup in the official Colorado Trail guidebook, turned up dry. So did the next one, and the next. By the time they camped under a cell phone tower, Stelzer was out of water, and Ahern had 3 cups left. Over a dinner of snack bars, they planned for the next day, when they were supposed to climb the highest point on the entire trail, Coney Summit. They could either keep going and take a chance on the next possible water source, which could also be dry, or hike back to Spring Creek. Remembering that night, Ahern said she was mad and disappointed with herself. "I should have known better," she said. Heidi, being her, was like, "It's climate change," Ahern said. "I don't know the answer to that. 10 years ago, there was still going to be water in that creek? I have no idea." Water in the high country. Stelzer is not the only one noticing drying in the area. Trail adopters Jody Pedersen and Dave Peters have too. On some sections of the trail, hikers pass water every 15 minutes, and trail users are well aware of certain segments without any water sources near the trail, they said. But the couple has seen changes in an 11-mile stretch of the trail, just west of Coney Summit, where they have been doing maintenance work since 2007. In 30 years' time, we've definitely noticed a difference in terms of the amount of water we see out there that's available through hikers, Peterson said about their adopted section. "I don't think there's any doubt there's decreased water up there." Researchers have noticed the snowpack and some streams are shrinking by small amounts each year. They're tracking larger temperature increases and drier summers in southwest Colorado, where much of the trail is located, than elsewhere in the state. Summer temperatures increased by nearly 3 degrees between 1980 and 2022 in southwestern Colorado, said Peter Gobble, a climatologist with the Colorado Climate Center at the Colorado State University. The average summer between 2001 and 2022 was 11% drier than the summers between 1951 and 2000. Statewide, summers are about 2.5 degrees hotter and 6% drier over the same periods, Goebel said. Climate models are kind of all over the map in terms of whether or not that trend will continue or even reverse, Goebel said. 2024 was certainly a wet summer for that area. so the year-to-year variation continues to be a very important factor. Finding water on the trail. After a coffeeless morning, Stelzer and Ahern ended up finding water in an unexpected way. The pair chose to continue toward the next potential water source. But before they got there, Stelzer noticed a pickup truck coming up the trail along a grassy mesa. A crew from Gunnison Trails was in the back country to do maintenance with jugs of cold water and snacks in tow. Stelzer hopped in the cab to catch up to Ahern, who had walked ahead. It was like a scene from a movie. Heidi was like, "We have water!" With half of her body hanging out of the truck, Ahern said. Every hiker, biker, and horsepacker on the Colorado Trail will have different stories about how they did it and didn't find water. Connie Weon, another trail adopter with the Colorado Trail Foundation, maintains a stretch next to a river and said her problem is when there's so much runoff that it impacts the trail. Jerry Brown, a surveyor who helped create the first detailed maps for the Foundation's guidebooks, has hiked it 7 times. He's noticed some drier conditions, but with good planning, experienced hikers will be fine, he said. If you come to a good water source, do not walk past it unless you know you're in range of another water source, Brown said. Type of story, news, based on facts either observed and verified directly by the reporter or reported and verified from knowledgeable sources. News, crime in courts. Broomfield police are responding to active shooting at apartment complex. Police said the shooting is happening at the Arista Flats apartments on Central Court by Jesse Paul. Broomfield police are responding Thursday morning to an active shooting at an apartment complex. Police said the shooting is happening at Arista Flats apartments on Central Court. The surrounding area is not safe, Broomfield police posted on social media at about 8 a.m. Shots are still being fired. Authorities are asking people in the area to shelter in place. Police said some limited evacuations have been done. Arista Flats apartments are just south of US 36, near the old First Bank Center. There are several apartment complexes in this area. Images captured by a television news helicopter that flew over the Arista Flats apartments showed a swarm of first responders in the area, including some carrying rifles and tactical gear. Kayla Levitt, who works at the pizza shop across the street from the apartment complex, said one of her servers heard as many as 20 gunshots. "That's like 50 cop cars over there," she said. "They are going in shields up right now." This is a developing story that will be updated. Type of story, news based on facts either observed and verified directly by the reporter or reported and verified from knowledgeable sources. News, housing. Does Denver have too many gas stations? City Council pushes new limit to save space for affordable housing. A proposed ordinance would build buffers between new gas stations, mass transit stops, and housing. By Michael Booth. Paul Cashman says he's not trying to shut off the gas pumps in Denver altogether. In fact, the service-minded Denver City Council member is still driving a gas car himself, and he doesn't like high prices or long drives to stations any more than the next person. But he is part of a city council movement that sees construction of new affordable housing as more important for Denver right now than an additional place to gas up and grab a bag of chips. Cashman and some colleagues are bringing a proposed ordinance for a 2024 committee green light that would build buffers between proposed new gas stations, mass transit stops, and residential housing. I have never gotten a call from anyone saying, "Hey, Councilman, I need to fill up my tank and I can't find anywhere to do it," said Cashman, who represents Southeast Denver's District 6. Instead, he gets call after call from citizens who say, "Why are they building another gas station on East Evans?" His colleagues in the south and north stretches of Denver get the same calls. Why do we need 4, 5, 6, 8 gas stations on Evans between Colorado and Quebec? Asked Cashman, a 9-year council member. The rules currently under draft would bar a new gas station closer than a quarter mile from existing pumps, a quarter-mile buffer from an existing light rail station, and 300 feet to the nearest residence. Still in play in the negotiations, Cashman said, is a provision allowing gas pumps combined with a new grocery store if it is serving a, quotes, food desert that lacks healthy food retailers. That exception, he added, must include definitions of a true food desert and what constitutes healthy food for a neighborhood. Cigarettes and soda alone won't cut it, he said. Like any other big city, Denver has lots of zoning ordinances that steer development in ways that are good for the community as a whole, Cashman said. The big need in the city and county of Denver is for housing, and we're a landlocked city, Cashman said. The places where gas stations tend to site are along our major transportation corridors, which is exactly where we're told it's best to site denser housing. The restrictions on new building have been met so far with surprisingly amicable negotiations with the gas station trade leaders. They have pushed back on some provisions, but say Denver's approach has been far more cooperative with business interests than gas station zoning in other cities. I think it's going to move forward in a way that we can implement it without unduly burdening the marketplace, said Greer Bailey, Executive Director of Colorado-Wyoming Petroleum Marketers. Gas station developers believe there are still parts of Denver that might need new pumps, including the growing housing developments at Green Valley Ranch and the varying businesses growing up in Denver International Airport Complex, rapidly becoming a city unto itself. Owners also want to make sure they can make renovations to existing stations or comply with environmental regulations demanding replacement of older underground storage tanks without triggering a no-building ordinance, Bailey said. That's where Denver's other zoning desires can come into play, Cashman said. Communities with only convenience stores instead of true full-service groceries might be willing to see new gas station if it also sold produce and healthy foods, he said. For their part, gas station developers know their market is changing rapidly, with more electric vehicles on the road and gasoline cars growing more efficient. A new station must accommodate not only EV chargers, but also the potential for hydrogen filling pumps or other technologies, Bailey said. Almost every new gas station is already designed to be certified for taking electronic benefits for healthy foods purchased using benefits from programs like Women, Infants, and Children, Bailey said. We don't build 6 pumps in a garage, we build small grocery stores, he said. Moreover, the industry is used to so-called setback zonings, which regulates any business where cigarettes and liquor are sold. New alcohol retailers in Colorado, for example, must be a certain distance from existing stores. The council is trying to strike the balance, and we appreciate being included in the conversation, Bailey said. It's not uniform support from the industry, but it has been collaborative. Cashman said drafts of the ordinance may continue to change with a target for the council committee passage later this year and a full council vote in early 2025. In the meantime, he said, Denver will still have plenty of gasoline. God bless those who are delivering us our petroleum gas because most of us still need it, he said. Full battery electric and plug-in electric hybrids currently account for 20% of new vehicle sales in Colorado. I do hope we get to a world someday where we're not burning up dinosaurs to get around, said Cashman, who is in his third and final allowed term on the council. But it looks like it's going to be a good long way down the pike. Type of story, news, based on facts either observed and verified directly by the reporter or reported and verified from knowledgeable sources. News, wildfire. Loveland man posed as firefighter after sparking Alexander Mountain fire, officials say. Firefighters got full control of the fire west of Loveland on August 18th, about 2 weeks after it started. By Olivia Pretzel. After allegedly sparking the Alexander Mountain fire, which destroyed more than 50 structures and burned nearly 10,000 acres in Larimer County, authorities say a 49-year-old Loveland man donned fake gear and posed as a wildland firefighter to get past roadblocks and enter restricted areas as real firefighters fought the flames. Jason Alexander Hobby, 49, was arrested Tuesday and faces first-degree arson charges. Booking records show he is being held in the Larimer County Jail on a $250,000 bond. Investigators also found that months before the fire, Hobby pulled people over in their vehicles while pretending to be a police officer in a Chevrolet SUV that was made to look like a law enforcement vehicle, told them they were trespassing and pointed weapons at them. Larimer County Sheriff John Fayen said during a news conference on Wednesday. Hobby, a former employee of Sylvan-Dale Guest Ranch, modified a four-wheel drive pickup truck with emblems reading Twin Buttes Fire Protection out of Wyoming and had fire gear decorated with similar emblems, Phelan said. The sheriff's office said there is no record of a fire department registered under that name. It was hard to tell to the point he was able to cross roadblocks to get to the fire scene, Fayen said. The fire was sparked by a campfire left unattended in a fire ring near the top of Alexander Mountain, investigators found. Fayen said investigators don't know if Hobby intended to start the wildfire. Hobby is originally from California and has been arrested several times there, Fayen said, adding that he is the only suspect in the case. The Alexander Mountain fire destroyed homes, endangered lives, and scarred our community, literally and figuratively. I'm extremely grateful for our LCSO investigation team and the U.S. Forest Service partners who worked nonstop to find answers in this case, Fayen said. I also want to thank Sylvan-Dale Ranch staff. Despite the fire danger at their doorstep, they were extremely supportive during the fire response and cooperated with our investigation in its aftermath. Sylvan-Dale Guest Ranch fired Hobby after law enforcement named him as a suspect in the case, Fayen said. What led us to him was good old-fashioned plain police work, Fayen said. We knew where the point of origin was, so we went up there to view what we could find and collect evidence with the Forest Service. From there, who saw the first fire first? So we began interviewing people, not technology, just good old detective work. Fayan added that Hobby posted photos of his fake fire vehicle on social media channels. A person using the handle Twin Buttes Fire Protection on X, formerly known as Twitter, posted about the Alexander Mountain fire as flames destroyed homes. Videos posted to the account show helicopters dropping water on the fire and thick smoke plumes. The sheriff ended the news conference without addressing how long Hobby was able to remain in restricted areas, how we exited the fire area, or how the ruse was eventually uncovered. Hobby faces 3 other felony charges, including aggravated assault with a weapon, impersonating a peace officer, and false imprisonment for stopping record show. The sheriff's office is asking for anyone who was stopped by Hobby when he was pretending to be a law enforcement officer to contact the office as they continue their investigation. Firefighters got full control of the fire west of Loveland on August 18th, about 2 weeks after it started. U.S. Forest Service investigators worked alongside the sheriff's office to try to figure out who caused the fire, even if it wasn't intentional. At the height of the fire, 625 personnel were on scene battling flames that destroyed 51 structures in Larimer County north of the Big Thompson Canyon. The fire destroyed 26 homes and damaged at least 4 others, according to a report by the Larimer County Assessor's Office. 21 outbuildings were also destroyed. The fire was one of 3 Front Range wildfires being investigated as human-caused and ignited in the last week of July. Type of story: news. Based on facts, either observed and verified directly by a reporter or reported and verified by knowledgeable sources. News: crime in courts. Teen boy shot by Colorado Town Council member after looking for a homecoming photo spot on private property, sheriff says. Colorado teens jumped a fence to look for a homeowner, hoping to ask for permission to come back later. One of them was shot, sheriff says, by Jennifer Brown. A 17-year-old boy was shot in the face after he and another teen hopped a fence onto private property in Conifer to scope out a good place for homecoming photos, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office said Wednesday. A member of the Mountain View Town Council was arrested in the shooting. The boy told the sheriff's deputy before he was taken by ambulance to a hospital that he and his friend drove to the property in Pleasant Park, parked at the home's gate, jumped the fence, and walked up the driveway to try to speak to the homeowner. The boys walked around the property trying to find a homeowner and then returned to their car, where they began writing a note to ask about the possibility of a homecoming photo shoot. That's when a truck pulled up next to them on a public road. The driver got out and shot at them through the car's windshield, the sheriff's office said in a news release. The round struck the 17-year-old in the face. When deputies arrived, they found the boy bleeding heavily from his face and his friend trying to apply pressure to his face with a T-shirt. Deputies came to the residence Tuesday afternoon because the homeowner had called Jefferson County Dispatch to report that she saw 2 trespassers on the property, which is in the mountains southwest of Denver. She also called her boyfriend to alert him of the trespassers. The woman wasn't home, but saw the teens via the property's security system. Brent Metz, 38, the caller's boyfriend and a member of the Mountain View Town Council, was arrested and booked in jail on charges of first-degree assault, felony menacing, illegal discharge of a firearm, and reckless endangerment. Deputies found the gun inside Metz's truck, and Metz was standing next to the boys when deputies arrived, they said. The sheriff's department did not say what kind of gun was used in the shooting. The teen was still hospitalized Wednesday, authorities said. Type of story: news, based on facts either observed and verified directly by the reporter or reported and verified from knowledgeable sources. News, education. Colorado avoided big funding cuts for schools, but relief for districts could be short-lived. A new funding formula about 30 years in the making is slated to take effect next year. But competing priorities and state budget constraints raise questions about pushing it forward. By Erica Brunlin. Colorado lawmakers averted the potential for serious funding cuts for schools after passing a set of modest property tax cuts during the special legislative session in August, but the relief for school districts could be short-lived. A tight state budget forecast and competing funding priorities are stoking fears that Colorado elected leaders could drop their pledge to begin wrapping up funding for schools next year. A new funding formula, signed into law in May after 3 decades of little change to the way Colorado distributes money to schools, was celebrated by a big partisan group of lawmakers as a landmark accomplishment of the 2024 legislative session. The new approach added to momentum for school finance after Governor Jared Polis and legislators pledged to fund schools to the level required by the state constitution for the first time since the Great Recession, eliminating the state's persistent school funding shortfall. But the latest state budget projections have cast uncertainty over whether Colorado will have the ability to pour $91 million more into the state's K-12 public and charter schools next year, as it begins to phase in new student-focused funding formula that promises an additional $500 million over 6 years. My understanding from even the June forecast said it's doubtful that we'll be able to fund this new school finance formula, Republican State Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer of Brighton told the Colorado Sun. What's going to be a problem for the new formula is what comes up in these next forecasts and what kind of funds actually come in for the state. She referred to the potential shelving of the new school funding formula as, quote, the quiet part that wasn't being said out loud. Kirkmeyer, who is also a member of the powerful Joint Budget Committee, said that while schools are her top priority, she is also primarily focused on funding them by following the Constitution, which requires the state to increase total school funding every year based on the rate of inflation plus population growth. Colorado is expected to be $400 million to $500 million short in its budget, Kirkmeyer said, citing the June forecast. That means the state can't carry over funding for all of the programs spelled out in this year's budget, she said. Compounding budget crunch is the need to address other state funding priorities, such as Medicaid, Kirkmeyer said. There has to become a reality check between revenues that are coming in and services that we can actually provide, she said. Scott Smith, Chief Financial and Operating Officer for Cherry Creek Schools, said that property tax cuts passed during the legislative session offer a brighter funding outlook for schools than 2 measures removed from the November ballot as part of the deal negotiating among lawmakers, the governor's office and conservatives outside the state capitol. But the deal doesn't fully preserve school funding. House Bill 1001 cut school property taxes by $136 million in the 2025-26 school year, which will only be partially offset by additional state support. Our state was already in an incredibly tight budget situation, and this compromise only makes it worse, Smith said. And based on the last 15-year history, we know that when the budget is tight, cuts come to education. He noted that it has been, quotes, made clear that districts will most likely have to work within the constraints of the 1994 School Finance Act next year rather than under the new school funding formula, with the state committing to fund schools to the level mandated by the Constitution. The Office of State Planning and Budgeting is working on its budget process and will rely on the economic forecast being released next week to develop Polis's budget proposal, which he will make public November 1st. While Colorado faces a tight budget environment and conversations around the budget are ongoing, Governor Polis is committed to the elimination of the budget stabilization factor and beginning implementation of the new student-focused school finance formula, which will take several years to fully implement. Spokesperson Shelby Wyman wrote in a statement, "These investments will mean more money to support student achievement and a stronger future for Colorado." It's also unclear whether the state will be able to afford other top education initiatives, including continuing to cover breakfast and lunch for all Colorado students, no matter their income, and providing more funding to schools and more students who come to school with additional challenges, said Tracy Rainey, Executive Director of the Colorado School Finance Project. I think the question is, does the state have enough funding to meet a variety of obligations that it's promised, whether it's around education or around other local governments? Rainey told The Sun, noting that lawmakers have repeatedly looked to the state education fund to support a variety of programs in addition to school operations. That's always the go-to place for money. But at this point, I don't know that there's much money there, Rainey said. The $500 million that is part of the new school funding formula only accounts for its implementation, Rainey noted, and does not account for money needed for inflation and population growth, money needed to fund at-risk students, and funding needed to backfill school districts in light of changes in local property taxes. Tensions between schools needing more money and an economy in flux. The legislature will ultimately decide whether to push forward the new school funding formula next year during the 2025 legislative session, with the power to make changes to the formula passed by lawmakers this year. Lawmakers will have to analyze the state's economic conditions laid out in revenue forecasts published in September and December, which will inform them about whether they would need to pause implementation of the new formula. The law includes a provision that enables the Joint Budget Committee to halt the new formula should fiscal challenges complicate its rollout. But lawmakers can come back to the table each year to decide again whether the state has the finances to activate the new school funding formula. State leaders also are waiting for information about the number of school-age kids they will need to fund after schools conduct their annual count of students in October, Rainey said. Once lawmakers have more details about state revenue and student tally, they must sprint toward the decision about how to direct funding of schools so that they don't delay districts' own budget planning in February and March, she said. If they take too long to make a decision, Districts are going to be left high and dry in trying to figure out how to do their budgets for the following year, Rainey said. So this information they need to be pretty upfront with and decide in January what it's going to look like. Schools and educational organizations that have been aware since the legislation passed that there's a possibility of economic hurdles triggering a pause in new school funding formula, but they continue to advocate for the new formula to take flight next year as planned. We waited for way too many years to have a new School Finance Act, said Brett Miles, Executive Director of the Colorado Association of Schools Executives. It was a difficult process to work through, but now that it's the law of the land and it's the movement forward, we're going to be advocating strongly that we need to find a way to make this work. Kirkmeyer of the Joint Budget Committee said schools cannot bank on funding increases through the new school funding formula with an economy in flux. As an individual who did a local government budget for 20 years, I would tell them they should never count on things like that, and that's why we do forecasts, she said. That's why we do budgeting and put together a plan for how the monies are going to be spent in the future. But if the state doesn't preserve and increase its education funding, Colorado will continue trailing other states in school spending, Miles said. We don't want to see K-12 becoming a smaller part of the state budget, he said. So we are very mindful to look at what percentage of the budget goes to K-12, and we don't ever want to see that slip. The only way we're going to catch up with other states and national averages and things like that is to not become a smaller part of the pie. Staff writer Brian Eason contributed to this report. Type of story news, based on facts either observed and verified directly by the reporter or reported and verified from knowledgeable sources. News Service, Crime in Courts. Colorado DA, who oversaw abandoned prosecution in Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, should be disbarred, panel says. The panel issued a 2-1 ruling Tuesday to disbar 11th District Attorney Linda Stanley, who prosecuted Barry Morphew in the death of his wife, Suzanne Morphew. Associated Press, Colleen Slevin. Colorado state regulators have ruled that a district attorney who brought criminal charges that were ultimately dismissed against a man accused of killing his missing wife should no longer be allowed to work as a lawyer, finding that her management of the high-profile case resulted in the prosecution running aground. The panel issued a 2-1 ruling Tuesday to disbar 11th District Attorney Linda Stanley, who prosecuted Barry Morphew in the death of his wife, Suzanne Morphew, who was reported missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Barry Morphew had posted a video on social media pleading for his wife's return soon after she vanished. His arrest a year later prompted a widespread media attention. A representative of Stanley's office who did not provide her name said Wednesday that Stanley had no comment. Stanley's lawyer, former prosecutor Stephen Jensen, said he and Stanley were considering whether to appeal the ruling to the Colorado Supreme Court, noting that one dissenting member of the panel said Stanley should be suspended rather than disbarred. As a rural district attorney not accustomed to handling high-profile cases, Stanley did not have as many resources as prosecutors in urban areas, and also had difficulty finding attorneys to work on the case, Jensen said. She was trying to conduct herself in an appropriate fashion under difficult circumstances she was presented with, he said, echoing an argument he made before the panel when it held a 2-week hearing on Stanley's conduct in June. A final order that would prevent Stanley from working as a lawyer is normally issued 35 days after a ruling, but the opinion said that Stanley can ask for a delay to allow for her appeal. Stanley dropped charges in Suzanne Morphew's death in April 2022, after a judge barred prosecutors from calling key witnesses for repeatedly failing to follow rules for turning over evidence to the defense. That included DNA from an unknown male found in Suzanne Morphew's SUV. The DNA corresponded with partial profiles found in 3 unsolved sexual assault cases. Lawyers for the office that oversees attorney conduct, the Office of Attorney Regulation Counsel, compared Stanley's conduct in the case at a June hearing to a ship's captain who didn't appear on the boat's bridge. The panel agreed, adopting the analogy. Respondents' absence at the helm during key phases of the prosecution, even when she was warned that it faced rough waters, led to a series of events that ended with first-degree murder case running aground, it said in its opinion. The panel found that after prosecutors were barred from violating evidence rules, Stanley launched a groundless criminal investigation into the presiding judge in a failed attempt to have him removed from the case. After that probe failed to turn up anything, Stanley asked for the case against Morphew to be dropped, the panel said. It also found that Stanley made unethical statements about the Morphew case, including comparing it to the cases of people convicted of murder, even where no body was found, in a chat forum for the Profiling Evil True Crime podcast. Suzanne Morphew's remains were found in September 2023 in a remote area of central Colorado, more than 40 miles, 65 kilometers south of her home in the mountains near Salida, Colorado, as authorities were pursuing a different case. An autopsy report released in April labeled her death as homicide, but said she died by undetermined means. A cocktail of drugs that are used to tranquilize wildlife was found in one of the 49-year-old woman's bones, but there was no indication of trauma, the report said. The prosecutor for the part of Colorado where the body was found, 12th Judicial District Attorney Ann Kelly, has said her office was assisting in the investigation. No new charges have been announced. The panel also found Stanley violated ethical rules for comments she made in a fatal child abuse case in which she told a reporter that a man accused of killing his girlfriend's 10-month-old child agreed to be a babysitter so he could, quotes, get laid. Jensen said Stanley believed her comments to the reporter were off the record. Charges against the man and his girlfriend were dismissed because of Stanley's comments. Type of story: news service. Produced externally by an organization we trust to adhere to high journalistic standards. News business. Xcel drained its $94 billion energy efficiency budget after marijuana growers took notice and wants $34 million more. Unexpectedly high customer interest led Xcel to pull the plug on a program helping businesses green their operations for now. By Mark Jaffe. After shooting through most of its energy efficiency budget for this year, Xcel Energy has suspended all of its programs for businesses and asked state regulators for an additional $34 million above the $93.6 million already agreed on. In a filing to the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, Xcel Energy Colorado subsidiary, Public Service Company of Colorado, said there was, quotes, an unexpectedly high customer interest in participation in the company's electric energy efficiency offerings this year. The request has drawn pushback by consumer and business advocates and the staff for the Public Utilities Commission, as well as support from Denver and environmental groups who fear long-term damage if the programs are shut down. It has left the Utility Commission facing the tension of balancing cost-effective programs that support vendors and their employees and the need for cost containment and compliance with budget caps. Public Utilities Commission Chairman Eric Blank said at a September 4th Commission hearing. The Commission, however, has not yet issued a decision. Nothing has been resolved, said Justin Brandt, Utility Program Director for the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, or SWEEP, which supports adding $34 million. This could have a long-term chilling effect on an industry we have worked hard to build. The groups and agencies representing customers who would pick up the tab see Xcel Energy's request differently. This problem was caused solely by PSCOs due to the company's mismanagement of the programs. The Colorado Office of Utility Consumer Advocate, which represents residential and small commercial customers, said in a PUC filing. UCA's constituency has done nothing to cause this mismanagement problem and must not be held responsible for recovery of costs that exceed the Commission-approved goals and the associated budget cap, the agency said. Xcel Energy's residential energy efficiency programs, such as home weatherizations and rebates for energy efficiency appliances and upgrades to heating and cooling systems, are still being offered. Colorado Energy Consumers, which represents big industrial and commercial customers, said in a filing that it was only in May that Xcel Energy and a group of interveners, including itself and the consumer advocate, had agreed to a settlement budget of $78 million with a 20% budget cushion. Just giving Xcel Energy another $34 million, Colorado Energy Consumers said, would send the resounding and disturbing message that cost containment has no meaningful place at the Commission or as part of the energy transition. But freezing the programs until Xcel Energy's next demand-side management or DSM budget of 2025, as the utility has suggested an alternative, could have an adverse impact on the market for energy efficiency project and contractors. Denver is concerned that this is already occurring, and we have heard from customers and vendors that the freeze on electric EE offerings is threatening to cause canceled projects, the city said in a filing. Quick resolution is important to Denver. Xcel Energy said that by the end of July, it has spent more than $74 million of its budget, with $54.4 million going to business programs and $14.9 million to residential and low-income programs. That left about $18 million after expenditures for education and planning programs. Biggest demand? Mainly pot grow houses. Business programs exceeded their target budgets by 144%, driven by demand from the, quotes, indoor agricultural market, mainly marijuana grow houses. With grow lighting not slowing down as we had anticipated, Xcel Energy said, the company ended the Grow Lighting bonus early to assist with cost affected by this bonus and our effectiveness in managing the budget. The announcement that the bonus program would close led to a wave of applications to beat the deadline, which compounded the problem. They experienced a gold rush from the cannabis industry and fumbled it in the usual manner, and the usual manner is when they do something wrong, they come to the ratepayers for more money, said Joseph Pereira, Deputy Director of the Utility Consumer Advocate Office. But both those advocating for additional funding and those opposing it agreed that Xcel Energy should have done a better job monitoring the program.
If you enjoyed this program, please register for our free services at www.aftersight.org or by calling 303-786-7777.